Okay, I am getting ready to install a graphics kit on my Kove 450. I've done plenty of these or plenty of graphics kits, not necessarily on this bike, but plenty of graphics kits, and I've learned a lot through the years doing these. Just give you some tips to get started here. So first things first, some supplies that I like to use. So I have this old bathroom / kitchen padded mat. You could use an old blanket or something like that to sit down on, because you're going to be sitting down and kneeling and being in precarious positions. And the older you get, the more this sort of stuff helps. I also have, you can laugh all you want, but I have some knee pads because, again, you're going to be doing a lot of kneeling, and the older you get, the more you need stuff like that. I have some clean, brand new microfiber cloths, not used stuff that you have laying around the garage that has dirt and oil and stuff in it. So brand new, dustless microfiber cloths. This is a cool thing that I found for anybody that's interested. It's like a tissue box of microfiber cloths from Amazon for like $18. I use some spray alcohol. You can use parts cleaner, brake cleaner / contact cleaner, but I found that it kind of sometimes can eat the finish off of the plastics and take the shine away a little bit, so I'm a little leery on that, at your own risk. So I use alcohol, and then I've got a snappable tip knife. So if you don't have one of these are invaluable, because no matter how good your graphics kit is, I promise you'll be continually doing trimming as you put it on. And these tips just snap off one after another, and you've got a fresh, clean tip. So this is the Alpha brand. I've been using these for decades at this point for all kinds of various things. OLFA. You can look them up on Amazon or wherever and find them. Pretty handy. And I think the last thing I'll tell you too before I get started is that my graphics, I don't know about yours, but mine have always come in a small package or rolled up or something. And they always have some like curves and creases from being packed. You can see some right there. You can see some right here. So I like to lay everything out the night before and let it kind of rest and work out a lot of the folds and stuff like that, so I'm not dealing with any strange things to try to put on that might bubble up. Next thing is I'm going to clean the area that I'm going to use. Man, dust and dirt and little bits of things that can fly around in the air really get underneath the graphics, and they stick to the back of them, and it causes the bubbles underneath. So I'm going to blow this all off here, and this is going to be my work area. One more thing, wash your hands really good before you get started. You got to get this dirt and oil and stuff you've been that's just on your hands from messing around in the garage. Pulling the graphics off is always a little bit precarious and always nerve-wracking, to tell you the truth, but the older the graphics, the cheaper the graphics, the more they don't want to come off in one piece, the more they leave residue, and sometimes this is coming off real easy, but sometimes it's hours of work just getting the surfaces prepped. So but any way you go about it, if you leave any adhesive underneath it, like here's a little bit of adhesive left, if you leave that underneath, it's going to be a bubble. I'm going to have to actually smooth this out. This is some glue that I dropped on the bike when I was gluing the handle grips on. It actually fell down onto here. It's got a pretty smooth, but a little bit of a rough surface. This is going to be a bubble if I don't smooth that out. So you've got to prep these surfaces. You've got to get every bit of remainder of the old graphics adhesive. If there's any scratches or something, get some sandpaper and sand them out, because there will be bubbles underneath. And chances are it will get water or moisture or dirt underneath, and it'll turn into an even bigger bubble. This is a good example right here. I tipped over on my bike and it tore the graphics a little bit, so I'm able to pull all the graphics off, but there's a little bit of like scratch and residue underneath there. I'm going to need to smooth that out, because that will turn into a bubble. I almost forgot to mention the absolute star of the show here in terms of tools. Second only to importance of these items right here is a heat gun. You've got to have a heat gun to make your new vinyl malleable and flexible, and it activates the adhesive on the back. If you do not use a heat gun, this stuff will peel off almost within a day or so. Gotta have it. If you are in doubt about any piece getting in the way of putting an edge on or something like that, don't even question it. Just take it off. In most cases, you're going to want to take your seat off as well, because you're going to be folding the graphics along these edges and stuff, and if you try to do it with your seat on, you won't get it laid down correctly. I promise you. Even sometimes things like gas caps can get in the way of being able to like slip the graphics around here. So if you have to, don't be afraid. Take the gas cap off, work around that, put it back on. Make sure, again, you might have cleaned all this panel, but then if you take this off and you didn't clean under here and you're trying to get something that, some graphics that kind of hug tight up around this perimeter, you'll have residue and old gasoline, which dries up oftentimes as a bit of oil. So make sure you clean under that area as well. There are lots of techniques here, but I like to get started by kind of lining up a panel and making sure that it fits, or seeing areas where it's kind of difficult to see on the camera here, but you can see like this is kind of a crease or a recess in the plastic. So areas that might be trouble, I kind of look for reference points, like the actual point or tip of a fender where it hits the sides, and try to make sure that I'm symmetrical and not off to one side. And I kind of pick a place to start. Oftentimes that is a centered tip or something like that. The only problem is you can get this centered and then have it slightly off in one direction as you go up or not. So you kind of got to peel back just a spot to start with here, get a good reference point, and start and kind of work your way across the panel. Sometimes it's down, sometimes it's forward, sometimes it's backward, sometimes it's to the side. But you pick a good reference point, get started there. After you've lined it up and kind of visualized how it's going to fit on here, and then you have to come back and we will clean our surface good. So you can actually see I just took a bunch of junk off of this piece of plastic here just by cleaning it. So I'll clean the surface really good, and then I'm going to flip over and use the dry side and kind of get any residual dust off of it. I also like to take the piece that I'm about to work with and heat it up. Doesn't take a ton, but just get some heat into it so it's nice and flexible. Don't get too close to this thing because you can melt this plastic, but you can actually see it starting to kind of like form and kind of expand and contract and bend. You can see that stuff is kind of laying down, becoming flexible. So heating it up prior to putting it on is also not a bad idea at all, to get the whole thing much more flexible than it was to get started with. Now, careful, like I just laid this down on the ground, that means I picked up dirt and dust and stuff like that down here. Careful not to lay it back on because you just cleaned that. So sometimes if I'm going to be working with a panel, I will actually clean the back of the panel off if I'm not pulling all of the backing off at one time, which in this case I'm not going to. So I'm going to start with that reference point. This is a good example also I'm about to show you of stuff that just shows up randomly even after you've cleaned it. Like look, there are bugs there's tiny little bugs trying to go onto this, and then you wipe them off and you get oil on there. So all kinds of little things happen as you are doing this, and even when you think you've got it clean. So just always look, always clean if in question. So as I said, I have kind of picked a reference point, and in this case it is this point that matches up with the tip of the fender, and going to remember where I had kind of visualized that being. Right here, I'm also going to look at the symmetry here for this edge versus this edge to make sure I'm not getting off in one direction. And the good thing about not having peeled all of this up right here is I can kind of lay this down. I can get it lined up like this to where I see it's lined up this way, and I can kind of go back and see how it's lined up, and you can actually see that I've got these holes off just a little bit, so that means the whole thing is kind of shifted that way. So I need to pull back up a little bit, try to keep that reference point in mind, and then just shift the whole thing just slightly this direction here. It's okay to pull the graphics up just a little bit, a couple of times. You can see now that I've got these kind of reference lines right here. I've got these holes. Everything is all lined up better. So now I can kind of push this down with my finger, and that has started this panel. Now, you kind of find a point too also, and you work your way in with your finger. You don't just like kind of smash the whole thing down randomly. You kind of have to, almost like giving somebody a massage, you kind of have to work your way around in different directions here. It also does not hurt to stop and heat this up again and keep it nice and flexible. Heat it up right here. Make sure all of this stuff is kind of formed to the contours, and then heat up the rest of it once again and get it nice and flexible. This heat gun isn't super powerful. Some of them are really powerful. Careful what you put it on, what setting you put it on, because you could really kind of melt this stuff. Hair dryers also work half decent, to tell you the truth. So again, I'm going to work my way into this. So I'm kind of going to draw a line in the middle here, and I'm going to kind of, again, I'm going to massage it. I'm going to work my way in and around. I'm not just tacking it all down at one time. And when you see little bubbles like this forming in these cracks and crevices, that's a good idea to pull it back, find that spot, rub your finger in there. Some people even put alcohol on their fingers to get their fingers to slide better, which is not a bad idea. I've never tried it, but I've seen people do it. So you can see now that that went into that contour without any bubbles right there. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to use my finger, and I found the contour there. You can see it starting to form, and I'm going to work my way up it. Again, if I was just to slap it down, I'd trap bubbles in there. So now I've got this kind of main contoured area pushed down onto here. So this is where I make sure that I'm lined up, and then I start working my way down it. Again, I look for contours and I rub my fingers in those contours. If it's starting to bubble up, then I will pull back just a little bit and start. The key is, if you see a bubble at all, pull back a little bit and start. You want to unstick this as much as possible, I should say. And now to kind of a different part, and you see it starting to kind of wave up right here. So I'm going to get my heat gun, and we're going to heat up this area. And then we're going to, again, massage it down. You see all of that comes out. This is never going to be perfect. You're going to see the flaws as you go. It's just part of it. You're going to see little imperfections in the plastic that you didn't really even know existed. So once this is put on, you've got to go back and heat up the whole thing, especially all the curved areas. You've got to put it down, push it down with your fingers really good, especially all these little curved edges that wrap around stuff. If you do not go back after you're done and heat up this all up and heat up all the contours and rub all the contours down, I promise you it will not stick. As I mentioned, I found some rough spots here. Just gonna sand ever so lightly. And clean all this stuff up. The larger the panel, the trickier this can be. So again, this comes down a lot to kind of starting by laying it up here and visualizing what you're going to do. You have reference points, right? So here's a reference point for a hole there. There's a reference point for a hole there. See what I thought was lined up here? Clearly not. So the whole thing has to shift. So you can see that's lined up. This hole is lined up. So you look for these reference points and you see how the whole thing is going to kind of lay down, the contour areas that you're going to have to fight with, and the direction that you should work in. And as I said before, you'll get stuff on the back of these, so I try to wipe them clean, but I still got more stuff here just by laying this up and kind of visualizing. So do not be afraid to keep that rag handy and keep wiping things down. Vicious dogfight going down. Dude, y'all are lame. So again, I've got my reference points here, here and here, and I've peeled back just the stuff that I need here to get it started. This takes practice and takes patience, but you kind of get to where you can see it and stick it. And you just kind of get yourself, again, just get yourself started. And then we'll go back and look and we'll see, does the rest of this line up, or did we have our angle off, or did we have our spacing off? And here's a good example of where this looks correct here, but this reference point is off here. So you kind of have a couple of choices here. You can work your way out, and when you get to this, you can kind of trim around, which is probably what I'm going to do, or you can pull this back off, and you can have these holes a little bit off-centered here and shifted back just a little bit. So this won't line up perfectly, but this will line up perfectly. I prefer, I think, aesthetically or cosmetically to have these holes line up and just trim that. So you've got some options, but again, this is part of graphics kits. They never fit exactly perfect. Again, I am heating the panel. I'm going to pull back a little bit more, not the whole thing, but I'm going to pull back a little bit more. I'm going to fold it down. I'm going to wipe the area, make sure not to touch this with your rag because it'll pick up fibers and stuff, but I'm going to wipe that area I'm about to work in. Even touching it with like the hair on the back of your hands will pick up stuff and it'll stick to this. Then again, I'm going to pick a point kind of in the middle or at the beginning, and I'm going to kind of start massaging it out. I'm not going to lay the whole thing down at one time. There we go, starting to look good. If you feel like you've got a problem area and things are getting kind of tight, like this is a contour and it's contoured in and then it bubbles over, so this is all going to start to get tight, do not be afraid to add a little more heat and just make it nice and flexible in that area. And when you get to a certain point, you can kind of like pull the backing off and work your finger as you go, and you can kind of see where the backing is at, and I'm pulling it off and I'm kind of working it on as I pull the backing off. And as you get towards the end, you'll see the whole thing gets a lot easier. So I'm actually going to leave this backing on right here, and I'm going to pull this one off on the top because this curves down this way, and that could get more difficult. So I'm going to pull this backing off. We're just going to work with this top area here. And you can see it's starting to kind of crease. This is where I need, it's starting to get, crease is not the right word. It's starting to get kind of tight right there and bowed up. This is where you've got to, again, stop, add more heat. And you can see creases kind of start to form, so sometimes you have to, again, pull it back up and find some other areas to work your way in. And again, you can't just stick all this stuff down at one time. You've got to kind of do it in sort of almost like a wave, right? It's got a kind of wave of where it sticks down. And before you know it, you'll have a panel that's stuck down nicely. And again, might have to add some more heat. Work your way over the curves. Do not run your hand down this way because it'll build up a lot of slack that way. Work your way around the curves. Look at that. Whole top panel done nicely. Okay, so here's the part where I said it didn't line up. So we've got to kind of, again, use our knife here. We've got to kind of make this curve a little bit longer and a little bit wider. So we kind of try our best to trace this area. It's difficult to do. You've got to be patient with it, and you do a little bit at a time. And then you try to match the curve that you've got there. I didn't cut thick enough, but maybe that'll help us get this stuck down so I can cut the rest. Yeah, you can start to see I'll be able to use some heat. Smooth all this stuff out. And I've got a nice edge I can cut around here. Again, go slow, controlled, and use a sharp, fresh tip. And then, again, it's never going to be exact perfect, but you can clean it up. And the thing about graphics kits is never look too close, because you'll always see things like, oh, I didn't get that line exactly straight, or whatever, or this curve right here, this radius doesn't match this radius. Never look too close, because you'll always see this stuff. But as you can see, if you step back, I've got that nice and fitted around there. So always go back and use heat to the whole panel. Again, you can start to see that things are starting to kind of come up a little bit as the whole thing relaxes, and you've got to go back and reheat this thing and reapply it. This can be a little bit hard to see here, but here's an example of an edge that will not come down, or will not lay down, I should say. So in these cases, a lot of times you can just kind of cut yourself a little bit of a V, and it relieves some of the pressure of that corner. Probably can't see what I'm doing here, and might need to clean up your line a few times, but that will relieve the pressure of that corner. Go back and apply some heat, and that corner will be stuck down. And I know this seems like a tiny little tedious detail, but the thing is that that tiny little opening that I showed you there, that would get water and dirt down in it, and it would start to peel and go all the way down into this, which would go all the way down into here. Yep, completely flat now. It is extremely important, and hear me, it is extremely important during this process to stop and entertain your animals, because they love you. Sometimes with the smaller panels, I will just completely take them off. After I've visualized where they go, I will kind of take them off and do them in one sort of fell swoop here. Again, this is after I've kind of lined them up and visualized where they're going. And I get them done and on in just one take. I get them started, and then I start to see where they contour. Then I'll come back with some heat and finish it up. This is an important lesson. I don't know if you can see this, but you see as you go around a contour edge like this, you see these things start to kind of wrinkle up like this. Again, for the umpteenth time, heat is going to really be your friend here. As you go, don't forget to snap off a bit of your blade, get yourself a clean tip. So this panel right here is being really problematic because you're changing like planes in 3 dimensions here. You're going out this way and you're going out that way. So it's not liking this bend. So I'm actually going to do something that I've done before, which is I find a good spot in the section here, and I will literally cut this into sections. So, sorry the camera's going upside down here because I'm looking upside down, but I will find a clean spot where it's not going to be so obvious, and I will literally cut the panel into multiple pieces so that I can get one end of it to stick down, and then I'll come back and fix this edge. So I've got those 2 panels separated, and I laid this top panel down over this other one, and I'm going to come back and clean up this line here. So you see they're separated, but that's okay. It just it kind of almost looks like they're 2 separate panels, you know. So Sometimes you just got to do that. That's why this comes in super handy. This is also why you, again, never look too close at your own graphics kits, because you'll see every single flaw in there, and they're never going to be perfect. Okay, this really large panel right here, this is again where I'm going to have to cut it into multiple sections. So you can see that I can get all this stuff lined up right here, but then this hole for the tank does not line up. Even if you were to kind of smooth this down and kind of mimic being glued down, this tank hole doesn't line up. What I also noticed too is that when you line this hole up, this is off. So what I'm going to end up doing is cutting this into several different pieces. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut along this line right here, and I'm also going to probably cut somewhere halfway in the middle of here, because this doesn't line up with this, and this is going to give me a problem lining up here. See, this is off. I have to pull this up to get it to line up here, here, and here, and then this is off. So cut here and cut there, and I think we'll be fine. So you can see I did a slow, controlled cut around here, and now all of this stuff fits nicely here, and I'll be able to lay this bottom part on, and then this middle part and this bottom part on with these holes lining up, and we'll just be able to see a cut right here, but I mean, it just looks like part of any other panel connecting to another panel, so it's really not a big deal. So here's these two panels put together. Again, it just looks like two panels meeting right there, so cutting a line, no big deal. I didn't cut it perfectly straight, but I'll say it for the umpteenth time. Don't look too close at your own graphics kit. But this line actually, where they meet right here, this is a good example of how far off this was. And I don't care what brand of graphics kit you buy, even if you pay for the expensive SKDA or what, you have your local favorite person do it, they're all going to have something that they don't line up on. So this gap right here between these two, this is where I cut, and that's how far off this hole was from that hole right there. So it's a good thing I cut this panel. There was no way that was ever going to fit. One of the things I didn't mention is that when you get to the side that's leaning away from you, I always start with it on the kickstand, because that way you've got a good angle here and you can see stuff clearly. But when you get to the other side and it's angled away from you, it gets a little more difficult. So I like to grab a stand and actually put it on the stand so it's at least straight up and down and you can see your angles, instead of on the kickstand side leaning towards you and you can't see everything nice and straight. That way, when we get to this side, we got a nice flat canvas here rather than something leaning at us. And then when you get to the side and you get it on the stand, again, another important note, you got to stop and toss the ball to your dog. I personally find that the front fender can either be one of the most difficult or the easiest. And it all has to do with lining up this reference point right here. But the problem is you could be slightly off on that side once you get it, or slightly off on this side. So getting it centered, finding the reference point, getting all this to happen, and keeping this middle panel lined up. So you see, I thought I was lined up down here, but I'm actually off right here. So I have to shift the whole thing just a tiny bit. So again, before you get started, visualize this whole thing on here, and then wipe it back down again. And apply heat. Another example of sometimes where you have to modify. So this curve right here was giving me a lot of trouble. The air bubbles were getting stuck in there. So razor blade, boom, cut that off. And nobody knows any different but you, and you have a nice clean look, no air bubbles. So one last thing on the front fender, you see that the bottom of the plastic lines up pretty nicely with this edge, but then as you get here, it wraps around, and this is going to get wet and going to get torn. So you have to get a fresh tip on your blade, and you have to very carefully follow that edge and make sure that there is no overlap hanging down that's going to get caught by mud and water, and you got to clean that edge up right there. Because of what I've learned on the other side about this panel, I'm going to go ahead and, before I even start, I'm going to go ahead and pre-cut this one into two sections. Cutting that into sections also allowed me to do this in like one swipe instead of having to kind of halfway peel back the backing and then go at it in chunks. So it's another good reason to kind of cut the panels in good strategic places. Another good thing about cutting that panel, see, this is how big the gap would have been right there. That's how difficult that would have been to stretch that around to get this to line up with these holes right here in these edges. So again, cutting panels, good trick. And don't think that me trimming and cutting panels and stuff like that is a sign of a cheap graphics kit or a bad cut or something like that, because I'm telling you right now, even the most expensive SKDA stuff still never fits perfect. Look, and when your rag gets like this, throw it away. Get another one, because if you're trying to just save a microfiber cloth, you're wasting time because it's going to get crap underneath here. Boss, are you working real hard in the sun? Good job, buddy. Appreciate your help. Just like on the other side, for this panel, we decided to cut it here and here. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm trying to follow this line as straight as I can here. And then I'm going to also use this as kind of a reference to kind of keep a straight line going there. I guess both these dogs worked so hard, they deserve a nap. That's okay. Don't get up from me, buddy. So I generally find that fork guards are the least lining up thing I've ever seen on every bike I've ever had. And this side is a great example. It does not like to wrap around there. These edges aren't the same, so you gotta, again, put this one on, heat it up, wrap it around, and really visualize the way it's gonna go on there before you start putting it on here. And this one will probably, no matter what you do, you're probably gonna end up doing some trimming on this one. So let's heat it up and get it on there. So I've got it started, and on the fork guards, get it started. After heating it up and putting it on to get it started, you got to heat it again, and then you got to kind of work your way around the guard. So you're massaging it around the guard there. There we go. That one wasn't too bad, but there are a few spots I've got to trim so that it doesn't get messed up. And just kind of like the front fender, this is a spot that's going to get sprayed with all kinds of mud and things like that, so we've got to make sure there's no overhang or anything like that. So you can't probably see it very well, but there is some overhang right here, and we need to trim that off. So this is tricky to be steady with your hand, but it can be done. So now we can see some of the plastic of the fender there. That means we've got a good sealing surface, if you will. So that side was pretty easy. I'm going to heat it up one more time, and then we'll move to the other side. All right, this side is a little bit trickier because you've got cables routed, and you've got to get this over that. So if you want to do this with it, oh great, tools are falling apart. If you want to do this with it on, then you've got to get your cables pulled away from the fork guard. Not every bike you can do this on. Sometimes you're going to have to take the fork guard off, but I think we can do it on this one by just moving this out of the way, like so. Alright, I had to slide it over just a little bit to get it to line up, but actually I don't think I'm going to have to do any trimming on this one, so let's just put this back together, and I think this is going to fit without having to take it off the bike, which is wonderful, because that saves us time. And on some bikes, getting to the inside screw on here actually means removing the front wheel, so it can be a pain in the butt. So if we can do this on, that saves us time. Boom. Very nice. Okay, there she is, final product. Let's do a little walk around. So looks pretty damn good to me. What do you think, Lulu? Looks good? Yeah, you don't care about anything but that ball, do you? Yeah, looks pretty good to me. I don't know if you noticed, but I also put some like fake carbon fiber fork guards on here to kind of black out the fork guards, and then I've got some, obviously some hand guards here that look a little bit different too, and I've got a taller windscreen, but I think it really came together as a nice package. Cool. Well, I hope this video helps somebody have some confidence to do their own graphics kit, and I hope it also shows you what it's like to put a graphics kit on a Kove 450 Rally. Say bye, guys. Bye. Say bye, boss. Later.